For 3,000 years, the Galactic Empire believed they had wiped out humanity completely. They celebrated the destruction of Earth as their greatest victory, turning the blue world into nothing but space dust and memories. The Empire's history books called it the final solution, the day they eliminated the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever seen. But the Empire made one critical mistake. They assumed all humans lived on Earth. Now, as their massive fleet patrols the outer rim, confident in their absolute dominion over 1,000 worlds, something impossible appears on their sensors. Ships. Human ships. Not just a few desperate survivors hiding in the shadows, but an entire armada that shouldn't exist. The technology is beyond anything the Empire has ever encountered. The fleet size defies comprehension, and every single vessel carries the same message painted across its hull in letters that burn like stars. For Earth, for our children, for humanity's tomorrow. The Empire is about to learn that humanity's greatest strength was never their homeworld. It was their ability to adapt, to survive, and to become something far more terrifying than their enemies ever imagined. This is the story of what happens when the hunters become the hunted, when the extinct species returns with a vengeance, and when an empire that thought itself invincible faces the wrath of humanity unleashed. Admiral Vexthara stood before the massive viewing screen of the Imperial Dreadnought Eternal Dominion *. His four arms crossed behind his back as he surveyed the peaceful expanse of the Outer Rim territories. The scaled reptilian commander had served the Galactic Empire for over 2 centuries, and in all that time, he had never seen the galaxy so perfectly ordered, so completely under their control. "Status report," Vexthara commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had crushed a dozen rebellions and conquered 50 worlds. "All sectors remain secure, Admiral," replied Commander Zector, a smaller reptilian with nervous eyes that darted constantly across his control panels. "Patrol fleets have reported no unusual activity. Trade routes are flowing smoothly. The tribute collections from the outer colonies exceeded expectations by 12% this quarter." Vexthara nodded with satisfaction. 3,000 years had passed since the Empire's greatest triumph, the complete annihilation of Earth and the human species. The galaxy had been at peace ever since, with no major threats to challenge Imperial rule. The humans had been the last species foolish enough to resist total surrender, and their destruction had served as a permanent reminder to all other worlds about the price of defiance. "Sir," interrupted Lieutenant Kixnala from the communications station, "we're receiving some unusual readings from long-range sensors. Deep space scanners are detecting something at the edge of sensor range." "Define something," Vexthara said, turning his attention to the young officer. "Unknown energy signatures, Admiral. Multiple contacts, but the readings are inconsistent. They appear to be moving in formation, but their technology doesn't match anything in our databases." Vexthara moved closer to examine the sensor displays. His experience had taught him that anything unknown in space was potentially dangerous, especially in the outer rim where desperate pirates and rebels sometimes attempted to challenge Imperial authority with stolen or modified technology. "Range and estimated size?" he asked. "Approximately 8 light hours away, sir. Based on energy output, we're looking at capital ship-class vessels, but the signatures are unlike anything we've encountered. The quantum resonance patterns suggest advanced propulsion systems, possibly beyond our current technology level." This caught Vexthara's attention immediately. The Empire had spent centuries absorbing the technology of conquered worlds, incorporating the best innovations of hundreds of species into their military arsenal. The idea that some unknown force might possess superior technology was both intriguing and concerning. Could these be remnants from one of the ancient civilizations? Perhaps artifacts from the Zephyrian ruins or leftover technology from the crystal worlds? "Negative, sir. These energy patterns are consistent with active operational technology. Someone is controlling these vessels." Vexthara's primary eyes narrowed while his secondary eyes continued scanning the data. "Send word to command. I want a full battle group prepared for deployment. If we're dealing with unknown hostiles, we'll show them why the Empire has remained unchallenged for 3 millennia." "Admiral," Kixnala interrupted again, "the contacts are accelerating. They're moving directly toward Imperial space at incredible velocity. At current speed, they'll reach our border systems in less than 6 hours." "Impossible," Commander Zector said, rushing to his own sensor station. Nothing can travel that fast. The quantum barriers alone would tear apart any known hull material. Vexthara felt a chill run down his spine, an instinctive reaction that had kept him alive through countless battles. Something about this situation felt fundamentally wrong, as if the very nature of the threat was beyond his understanding. "Open a channel to Imperial High Command," he ordered. "Priority Alpha, I need to speak with Grand Admiral Mordex immediately." Within minutes, the imposing figure of Grand Admiral Mordex appeared on the main screen. The ancient reptilian ruler of the Imperial Navy was over 500 years old, with scars covering his massive frame, evidence of centuries spent conquering worlds for the Empire. "Admiral Vexthara," Mordex rumbled, "what requires such urgent communication?" "Grand Admiral, we have unknown hostile contacts approaching Imperial space. Multiple capital ships with technology that appears to exceed our current capabilities. I request permission to engage with full force." Mordex's expression grew serious. "Unknown technology? That should be impossible. Our intelligence networks monitor every advanced civilization in the galaxy. There are no species capable of challenging our technological supremacy." "Nevertheless, sir, these contacts are real and approaching rapidly. Their energy signatures suggest weapons and propulsion systems beyond anything in our databases." "Very well, you have permission to engage, but I want live data feeds throughout the encounter. If someone has developed technology that threatens the Empire, we need to understand it immediately." As the communication ended, Vexthara turned back to his crew. "Signal the battle group. All ships are to form defensive formations and charge weapon systems. I want full shields and maximum sensor sweeps. Whatever's coming toward us will be ready." The next few hours passed with mounting tension. Long-range sensors continued tracking the approaching fleet, providing more disturbing information with each update. The unknown vessels numbered in the hundreds, possibly thousands. Their acceleration profiles suggested propulsion technology that should have been theoretically impossible. Most concerning of all, they showed no signs of slowing as they approached Imperial territory. "Admiral," called out Commander Zector, "we're receiving a transmission from the approaching fleet." "Put it through," Vexthara commanded. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that made every Imperial officer freeze in shock. A face appeared, unmistakably humanoid, but not quite like the humans from their historical records. This being had the same basic features, but there was something different about the eyes, something harder and more determined than the desperate refugees the Empire remembered destroying so long ago. "To the forces of the Galactic Empire," the figure said, its voice carrying across the bridge with crystalline clarity. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Expeditionary Fleet. We are the children of Earth, the survivors you thought you had destroyed, and we have returned to reclaim what was stolen from us." Vexthara's blood turned cold. Humans? Impossible. They had witnessed Earth's destruction personally, had seen the planet reduced to cosmic debris. No one could have survived that level of devastation. "You destroyed our homeworld," Admiral Chen continued, "murdered billions of innocent people and declared our species extinct. But humanity's greatest strength was never our planet. It was our ability to adapt, to survive, and to grow stronger in the face of adversity. We scattered to the stars long before your attack, and in the centuries since Earth's fall, we have built something far greater than you ever imagined possible." The transmission showed brief glimpses of the human fleet, vessels that seemed to blur the line between technology and art, ships that moved like living things through space, weapons that pulsed with energy beyond Imperial understanding. "We do not come seeking war," Admiral Chen said, "but we will not accept anything less than the complete liberation of this galaxy from your tyrannical rule. Every species you have enslaved, every world you have conquered, every life you have stolen, all of it ends now." The transmission cut to black, leaving the Imperial bridge in stunned silence. "That's impossible," whispered Commander Zector. "We destroyed them all, we watched Earth burn." Vexthara's mind raced through the implications. If humans had somehow survived and developed superior technology, the Empire faced its first genuine threat in 3,000 years. But more than that, they faced an enemy motivated by revenge and equipped with capabilities that defied everything the Empire thought they knew about warfare. "Get me tactical analysis on those ships," he commanded. I want to know everything: weapons capacity, shield strength, propulsion systems, crew complements, everything. Sir, reported Lieutenant Kixnala, preliminary scans suggest energy outputs that exceed our most powerful dreadnoughts by several orders of magnitude. Their smallest vessels appear to carry firepower equivalent to our largest battleships. How many ships are we looking at? Current count shows over 3,000 vessels, sir, with more emerging from hyperspace every few minutes. This isn't just a fleet. It's an entire military force unlike anything we've ever encountered. Vexthara realized they were facing something unprecedented in Imperial history. For 3 millennia, the Empire had grown complacent, confident in their absolute superiority over all other species. They had never imagined that their greatest enemy might return from apparent extinction, transformed into something far more dangerous than before. Signal all Imperial fleets, he ordered. Full mobilization. Every available ship is to converge on our position immediately. If humanity wants a war, we'll give them the greatest battle the galaxy has ever seen. But even as he gave the orders, Vexthara couldn't shake the feeling that the Empire was about to face something for which 3,000 years of victories had left them utterly unprepared. The humans had returned, and they brought with them technology that challenged everything the Empire believed about power, control, and dominance. In the depths of space, the human fleet continued its relentless advance toward Imperial territory, each ship carrying the accumulated fury of a species that had been forced to the brink of extinction, and had emerged stronger, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous than their enemies had ever imagined possible. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's true power had never been their homeworld or their technology. It was their refusal to surrender, their ability to transform tragedy into strength, and their unwavering determination to ensure that no other species would ever suffer the fate that had befallen Earth. The final war for the galaxy's freedom was about to begin. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the command deck of the TSF Prometheus, watching the tactical displays as her fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of what the Galactic Empire called the Outer Rim. 300 years of exile had transformed humanity from desperate refugees into something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that had turned isolation into innovation and suffering into strength. Admiral, called out Commander Marcus Rivera from the tactical station, were detecting massive Imperial fleet movements throughout the sector. They're mobilizing everything they have. Sarah nodded grimly. She had expected this response. The Empire had grown arrogant during their 3 millennia of unchallenged rule, but they weren't stupid. They would recognize the threat her fleet represented, even if they couldn't yet comprehend its true scope. Current Imperial fleet strength, she asked. Long-range sensors show approximately 15,000 vessels converging on our position from multiple sectors. Dreadnoughts, battleships, cruisers, and support craft. It's the largest military deployment in recorded Imperial history. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her science station, her enhanced neural interface glowing softly as she processed incoming data. Like all humans born in the deep colonies, Elena had been genetically optimized for her role, her brain capable of processing information at rates that would have seemed miraculous to their Earth-born ancestors. Admiral, I'm detecting significant technological limitations in the Imperial fleet, Elena reported. Their energy efficiency is primitive by our standards. Their weapon systems rely on conventional particle acceleration and plasma discharge. Their propulsion technology appears to be standard fusion-based drives with quantum enhancement, technology we abandoned over a century ago. Sarah smiled coldly. This was exactly what their intelligence had suggested, but confirmation was always welcome. Show me a comparison analysis. The main display shifted to show side-by-side technological specifications. On one side were the Imperial vessels, massive, heavily armored ships that relied on brute force and overwhelming firepower. On the other side were the sleek, elegant vessels of the Terran Federation, ships that seemed to exist in harmony with the fundamental forces of the universe rather than fighting against them. The disparity is even greater than our projections, Elena continued. Imperial vessels average 60% energy waste in their primary systems. Their shields operate on basic electromagnetic principles that our disruption fields can penetrate effortlessly. Their weapons require massive power cores and cooling systems that create exploitable thermal signatures. What about their numbers advantage? asked Commander Rivera. Irrelevant, Elena replied without hesitation. Quantity cannot compensate for the technological gap we're observing. A single one of our frigates could engage multiple Imperial dreadnoughts simultaneously with confidence. Sarah had lived through the early years of humanity's exile, had seen the desperate struggle to survive in the cold depths of space after Earth's destruction. Those dark decades had forced humanity to abandon conventional thinking about technology, warfare, and survival itself. While the Empire had grown complacent, humanity had been forced to evolve or perish. Commander Torres, Sarah called to her communications officer, open a channel to the Imperial fleet. Let's see if we can avoid unnecessary bloodshed. The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to Admiral Vexthara, the reptilian commander whose forces were moving to intercept the human fleet. Sarah studied him carefully, noting the confidence that bordered on arrogance, the assumption of superiority that had defined Imperial thinking for so long. "Human Admiral," Vexthara began, his voice carrying the condescension of someone who had never faced a true challenge. "You display impressive technology for a supposedly extinct species, but you are vastly outnumbered. Surrender now and your deaths will be swift." "Admiral Vexthara," Sarah replied calmly, "I appreciate your concern for our welfare, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not here to surrender. We're here to offer you the same choice you offered Earth 300 years ago, submission or destruction." Vexthara's expression hardened. "You speak boldly for someone commanding a few thousand ships against the full might of the Imperial Navy. Our fleet outnumbers yours 5-1, and our weapons have conquered 1,000 worlds." "Numbers are meaningless when your technology is obsolete," Sarah said. "Let me demonstrate." She gestured to Commander Rivera, who activated one of their newest innovations, a quantum resonance scanner that could penetrate any known shielding system. The scanner focused on the Imperial flagship, and within seconds, detailed schematics appeared on the human fleet's displays. "Your ship, the Eternal Dominion Asterisk, is powered by 6 fusion reactors operating at 37% efficiency," Sarah said, watching Vexthara's expression change as she displayed information that should have been impossible to obtain. "Your primary weapons require a 7-second charging cycle between shots. Your shields operate on a rotating frequency that follows a predictable pattern. Your life support systems have redundancy failures in sections 12, 27, and 41. "How are you?" Vexthara began. "How are we reading your internal systems through your best shielding?" Sarah finished. "Because while you've spent 3,000 years conquering primitive worlds, we've spent 300 years pushing the boundaries of what's physically possible. We had to. Survival demanded it." She nodded to Dr. Vasquez, who activated a demonstration that would prove her point. One of the smaller human vessels, a frigate barely 200 meters long, moved toward the massive Imperial fleet. The ship seemed to shimmer and fade as its cloaking systems engaged, becoming nearly invisible to Imperial sensors. "Where did it go?" Vexthara demanded. The human frigate reappeared directly between 2 Imperial dreadnoughts, its weapons charging with energy that made space itself seem to bend around the vessel. Without warning, it fired, not at the Imperial ships, but at a small asteroid floating nearby. The asteroid simply vanished, not destroyed, but apparently translated out of normal spacetime entirely. "Dimensional displacement weaponry," Sarah explained calmly. "We don't destroy our targets, we remove them from reality. No explosion, no debris, no radiation signature. They simply cease to exist in this universe." The frigate demonstrated its next capability by accelerating to impossible velocities, moving between the Imperial ships faster than their targeting systems could track. It wasn't using conventional propulsion. It was manipulating local spacetime to create movement that transcended normal physics. "As you can see," Sarah continued, "we've moved beyond the technological paradigm that defines your civilization. We don't fight physics, we cooperate with it. We don't overpower our enemies, we outthink them." Vexthara's confidence was visibly shaken. "This is impossible. Our scientists have explored every avenue of technological development. There are natural limits to what any species can achieve." "Your scientists were limited by Imperial thinking," Sarah replied. "You conquered by force, absorbed existing technology from defeated civilizations, and never truly innovated. We had no choice but to transcend those limitations." When you have no homeworld, no resources, and nowhere to retreat, you either evolve beyond your previous capabilities or you die. She gestured to the tactical display, which now showed the full scope of the human fleet. Ship after ship emerged from hyperspace, each vessel representing technologies that the Empire couldn't comprehend, much less counter. We developed neural interface technology that allows our crews to think at the speed of our computers. We created self-repairing hull materials that adapt to any attack. We built power systems that draw energy from quantum vacuum fluctuations. We designed weapons that can target specific subatomic particles. We learned to travel between dimensions, to manipulate time itself, to turn the fundamental forces of physics into tools of war. The demonstration continued as human vessels displayed capabilities that seemed to violate everything the Empire understood about technology. Ships that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that could strike targets through several layers of spacetime. Defensive systems that rendered conventional attacks completely ineffective. But our greatest innovation, Sarah said, wasn't technological, it was philosophical. We learned that true strength doesn't come from domination, it comes from cooperation. Every species you've conquered or destroyed had knowledge, perspectives, and capabilities that could have enhanced your civilization. Instead, you chose fear and control. Dr. Vasquez highlighted another display showing the human fleet's true diversity. While the ships bore human design aesthetics, they incorporated technologies and perspectives from dozens of species, refugees and survivors who had joined humanity's exodus, contributing their unique knowledge to the collective effort. The Zephyrians who escaped your conquest taught us quantum consciousness manipulation. The survivors from the crystal worlds showed us how to grow technology organically. The refugee mathematicians from the Spiral Nebula helped us understand 11-dimensional physics. Every species you tried to destroy made us stronger. Vexthara stared at the displays, his confidence completely shattered. What do you want from us? What we've always wanted, Sarah replied. Freedom, not just for humanity, but for every species under Imperial rule. The galaxy belongs to all of us, not to any single empire, no matter how powerful they believe themselves to be. She gestured to her tactical officer, and the human fleet began moving into attack formations that seemed to flow like liquid through space. Each ship moved in perfect harmony with the others, their advanced AI systems coordinating at the speed of thought. You have one chance to avoid total war, Sarah continued. Order your fleets to stand down. Begin the process of liberating every conquered world. Allow the galaxy's species to choose their own destinies. Do this, and humanity will help you transition to a more enlightened civilization. And if I refuse? Sarah's expression hardened, carrying the accumulated rage of 3 centuries of exile and the memory of billions of murdered innocents. Then you'll learn why the universe created predators like us. You thought humans were dangerous when we were confined to one world, fighting with primitive technology. Now we're spread across 1,000 worlds, armed with science you can't comprehend, and motivated by the memory of everyone you killed. The human fleet continued its advance, each ship moving with deadly purpose. The technological gap was so vast that the Imperial fleet's numerical advantage meant nothing. This wouldn't be a battle between equals. It would be a demonstration of what happened when a stagnant civilization encountered one that had been forged in the crucible of near extinction. Choose quickly, Sarah said. In 1 hour we begin liberating Imperial worlds, starting with your outer colonies. Your technology cannot stop us, your numbers cannot overwhelm us, and your 3,000 years of victories cannot prepare you for what we've become. As the transmission ended, Admiral Vexthara stared at the tactical displays showing thousands of human vessels, each one representing a quantum leap beyond Imperial technology. For the first time in 3 millennia, the Empire faced an enemy they could not defeat through conventional means. The humans had returned, and they brought with them technologies that transformed science fiction into terrifying reality. Admiral Vexthara watched his tactical displays with growing dread as the human ultimatum countdown entered its final minutes. Around him, the largest Imperial fleet ever assembled waited in formation, 15,000 vessels representing the combined military might of 3,000 years of conquest. Yet somehow, facing fewer than 4,000 human ships, Vexthara felt more uncertain than he had in his entire military career. Sir, Commander Zector reported from his station, Grand Admiral Mordex is requesting an immediate status update. The massive form of Grand Admiral Mordex appeared on the main screen, his ancient eyes burning with the fury of absolute authority challenged. Admiral Vexthara, what is the current situation? My tactical advisors are telling me impossible things about human technology. Grand Admiral, the humans have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our understanding of physics. Their weapons can remove matter from existence, their ships can manipulate space-time, and their defensive systems appear to be completely immune to conventional attacks. Mordex's expression darkened. Are you suggesting that a few thousand human refugees have somehow developed technology superior to the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 conquered civilizations? I'm reporting what I've observed, sir. Their demonstration was convincing. Impossible, Mordex growled. The Empire has access to the greatest scientific minds in the galaxy. Our weapons have shattered planets. Our fleets have conquered species with technology spanning millions of years of development. These humans are using some form of deception or psychological warfare. Vexthara wanted to agree, but the evidence was undeniable. Grand Admiral, what are your orders? Destroy them, all of them. If they truly possess superior technology, we cannot allow them to survive to use it against us. Use every weapon at your disposal. Hold nothing back. As the transmission ended, Vexthara turned to his crew. All ships prepare for full engagement. Target the largest human vessels first. Maximum firepower, coordinated assault patterns. Show them the price of challenging Imperial authority. Across the Imperial fleet, 15,000 warships powered their weapons and adjusted their formations. Massive dreadnoughts moved into position, their quantum cannons charging with enough energy to devastate entire moons. Battle cruisers deployed their fighter squadrons while destroyers prepared to screen against any human counterattack. On the human side, Admiral Sarah Chen observed the Imperial preparations with calm professionalism. 3 centuries of preparation had led to this moment, and she felt the weight of every human life lost since Earth's destruction. All ships, this is Admiral Chen, she transmitted across the human fleet. Today we avenge our homeworld and begin the liberation of the galaxy. Remember our fallen, remember why we fight, and show these tyrants what humanity has become. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the Imperial fleet's energy signatures from her science station. Admiral, they're charging weapons across their entire formation. Power levels suggest they're preparing to use maximum force. Expected, Sarah replied. Commander Rivera, initiate combat protocols. All ships are authorized to engage at will. The human fleet's response was unlike anything the Imperial forces had ever witnessed. Instead of forming traditional battle lines or deploying in conventional attack patterns, the human ships began moving in complex 3-dimensional formations that seemed to flow like water through space. Each vessel moved independently yet in perfect harmony with the others, creating patterns that were both beautiful and terrifying. What are they doing? Vexthara demanded as he watched the human ships weave between his formations without any apparent concern for the massive weapons trained on them. Unknown, sir, Lieutenant Kixnala replied. Their movement patterns don't match any known tactical doctrine. They appear to be dancing. The Imperial fleet opened fire first, 15,000 ships unleashing concentrated barrages of plasma cannons, particle beams, quantum torpedoes, and gravitational disruptors. The combined firepower was enough to sterilize entire star systems, a devastating display of the military might that had conquered the galaxy. The human ships responded by simply not being where the weapons struck. They moved through space as if the laws of physics were suggestions rather than absolute constraints, sliding between dimensions, bending around attacks, and appearing in locations that should have been impossible to reach. Direct hit on human vessel designated Alpha 7, called out a weapons officer aboard the Eternal Dominion Asterisk. But as the plasma cleared, the human ship emerged completely undamaged. Its hull seemed to shimmer with energy that absorbed and redirected the attack, turning the Imperial firepower into power for its own systems. How is that possible? Vexthara demanded. Before anyone could answer, the human fleet began its counterattack. What happened next redefined the Imperial understanding of warfare itself. The human ships didn't use conventional weapons. Instead, they deployed technologies that attacked reality itself. Dimensional displacement cannons removed Imperial vessels from normal spacetime, causing them to simply cease to exist without any explosion or debris field. Quantum disruption fields caused matter to lose coherence at the subatomic level, making Imperial ships dissolve like sand in water. But perhaps most terrifying were the human vessels that seemed to attack through time itself. Imperial ships would suddenly experience their own weapons fire from several seconds ago, struck by attacks they had already made, but targeted through temporal loops that created devastating feedback effects. "Report," Vexthara shouted as alarm klaxons screamed across his bridge. "We've lost over 300 vessels in the first exchange," Commander Zector reported, his voice shaking. "But sir, they're not destroyed, our ships are just gone. No wreckage, no energy signatures, no trace they ever existed." The Imperial fleet's numerical advantage was rapidly becoming meaningless. Human vessels moved through their formations like deadly phantoms, each one capable of engaging dozens of Imperial ships simultaneously. Their weapons didn't follow conventional physics, their defenses seemed impervious to any form of attack, and their tactics were beyond anything Imperial strategic doctrine could counter. Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. This was what 3 centuries of desperate innovation had created, a military force that had transcended the conventional understanding of warfare itself. "Dr. Vasquez, deploy the neural network enhancement," she ordered. Across the human fleet, ships began linking their AI systems into a collective intelligence that processed information and coordinated attacks at the speed of light. What had been individual vessels became nodes in a vast consciousness that could anticipate Imperial moves before they were made and respond to threats that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The effect on the Imperial fleet was devastating. Every tactical decision, every formation change, every desperate strategy was instantly detected and countered by an intelligence that operated beyond anything biological minds could comprehend. "They're predicting our movements," reported the tactical officer aboard the Eternal Dominion. "Every maneuver we attempt, they're already responding before we complete it." Vexthara realized they were facing something unprecedented in galactic history, not just superior technology, but a completely different approach to existence itself. The humans had evolved beyond the limitations that defined every other species in the galaxy. "All ships full retreat," he ordered. "Fall back to secondary positions." But even retreat proved impossible. The human ships seemed to exist everywhere at once, cutting off escape routes, appearing behind fleeing Imperial vessels, and demonstrating that the very concept of distance was meaningless to their technology. A human frigate, barely 200 meters long, engaged the massive Imperial dreadnought destroyer of worlds The dreadnought's main guns, weapons that had shattered moons, fired at point-blank range, their energy output sufficient to vaporize a small planet. The human frigate absorbed the entire attack, its hull glowing with captured energy that was immediately redistributed throughout the ship's systems. Then it retaliated with a weapon that seemed to attack the dreadnought's atomic structure directly. The massive Imperial vessel simply fell apart, its molecular bonds severed at the quantum level. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez reported to Sarah Chen, "Imperial casualties are approaching 60%. Their fleet is in complete disarray." Sarah nodded grimly. There was no satisfaction in this slaughter, only the grim necessity of demonstrating humanity's capabilities. "Open a channel to the surviving Imperial ships." Admiral Vexthara's face appeared on the screen, his confidence completely shattered. Behind him, his bridge was chaos, sparking consoles, injured crew members, and the constant alerts of a ship barely holding together. "Admiral Vexthara," Sarah said, "this is what happens when stagnation meets evolution. Your empire had 3,000 years to grow, to learn, to become something greater. Instead, you chose to remain exactly what you always were, predators who mistake brutality for strength." "What are you?" Vexthara asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We're what your empire created when it tried to destroy us," Sarah replied. "We're the children of every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved, every life you've taken. We're the universe's response to your tyranny." She gestured to the tactical display, which showed the devastation of the Imperial fleet. "You can surrender now and begin the process of liberating your conquered worlds, or you can continue fighting and watch your entire civilization reduced to the same ashes you made of Earth." Vexthara looked around his ruined bridge, at his terrified crew, at the tactical displays showing the complete destruction of the galaxy's most powerful military force. What guarantee do we have that you won't simply destroy us all? The same guarantee you gave Earth, Sarah said coldly. None. But unlike your empire, we don't find pleasure in genocide. We want freedom for all species, including yours. Choose surrender and live to see a galaxy where strength comes from cooperation rather than conquest. The communication channel closed, leaving Vexthara to contemplate the impossible choice before him. Around his ship, the remnants of the Imperial fleet drifted in defeat, their legendary invincibility proven to be nothing but an illusion maintained by fighting primitive enemies. The humans had returned, and they brought with them a power that made the Empire's 3,000 years of conquest seem like children playing with toys. The galaxy's greatest military force had been shattered in less than an hour by an enemy they had thought extinct. For the first time in 3 millennia, the Galactic Empire faced the possibility of its own destruction, and there was nothing in their experience or their technology that could prevent it. Grand Admiral Mordex stood in the central command chamber of the Imperial Citadel, staring at tactical displays that showed the complete destruction of his Outer Rim fleet. 15,000 vessels, reduced to fewer than 2,000 survivors in less than an hour. In 3,000 years of Imperial expansion, nothing like this had ever happened. Impossible, he muttered, his 4 arms trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. Absolutely impossible. Around him, his senior staff worked frantically to process the incoming reports. Fleet Admiral Kexthar, the Empire's chief military strategist, approached with data tablets that contained information that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. Grand Admiral, Kexthar said carefully, our surviving ships have transmitted detailed combat logs. The human technological capabilities appear to be beyond our current understanding of physics. Mordex turned his burning gaze on his subordinate. Explain. Their weapons don't operate on any principles we recognize. Instead of destroying matter, they remove it from existence entirely. Their ships can manipulate space-time directly, allowing them to move through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their defensive systems seem to convert incoming attacks into power for their own systems. Are you telling me, Mordex growled, that a species we exterminated 300 years ago has somehow developed godlike technology? Sir, the evidence is undeniable. Our most powerful weapons had no effect on their vessels. Their smallest ships could engage our largest dreadnoughts with complete impunity, and their numbers continue to grow as more ships emerge from hyperspace. Mordex moved to the strategic display showing the entire galaxy. Red markers indicated Imperial-controlled systems, over 3,000 worlds representing the greatest empire in galactic history. But now, green markers were appearing at the edge of Imperial space, indicating the approaching human fleet. Current human fleet strength, Mordex demanded. Over 7,000 vessels now, sir, with more arriving constantly. But Grand Admiral, the numbers are almost irrelevant. Based on what we've observed, a few dozen of their ships could devastate our entire navy. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Empire had built its power on military supremacy, the absolute certainty that no force in the galaxy could challenge their dominance. Now they faced an enemy that made their greatest weapons seem like primitive tools. Sir, interrupted Communications Admiral Jexvara, we're receiving transmissions from our border systems. The humans have arrived at the Kethara system. Mordex activated the communication array, connecting to the regional command post in the Kethara system. The face that appeared belonged to Admiral Thexnal, a veteran commander who had overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds. Grand Admiral, Thexnal said, his voice strained. The human fleet has entered our system, but they're not attacking our military installations. What do you mean? They're targeting the slave processing centers, the re-education facilities, and the tribute collection stations. They're liberating our conquered populations. Mordex felt a chill run down his spine. Explain in detail. The transmission showed footage from across the Kethara system. Human ships had positioned themselves around every Imperial installation that housed enslaved populations. But instead of attacking with their devastating weapons, they were deploying some form of advanced technology that simply transported entire populations away from Imperial control. They're using some kind of mass teleportation system, Thexnall continued. Thousands of beings are simply vanishing from our facilities and appearing aboard their ships. No explosions, no violence. They're just taking our slaves and leaving. Fight them, Mordex commanded. Use the slave populations as shields if necessary. Sir, we tried. Any Imperial ship that approaches the human vessels simply stops working. Our systems shut down, our weapons go offline, and our crews lose consciousness. When they wake up, their ships have been disabled and any enslaved populations have been removed. This was worse than military defeat. It was a complete demonstration of technological superiority that made resistance meaningless. The humans weren't just more powerful. They operated on a level of capability that made the Empire's response irrelevant. Meanwhile, aboard the TSF Prometheus Asterisk, Admiral Sarah Chen coordinated the liberation operations with quiet efficiency. 3 centuries of planning had led to this moment, and she intended to ensure that every enslaved being in Imperial space had the chance for freedom. Dr. Vasquez, status report on the neural interface operation, Sarah requested. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored multiple displays showing the quantum consciousness transfer process. Admiral, we've successfully extracted 47,000 beings from Imperial slave facilities in the Cathara system. The neural restoration protocols are working perfectly. We can reverse decades of Imperial conditioning within hours. This was perhaps humanity's greatest innovation, the ability to heal psychological trauma at the neural level. Every species enslaved by the Empire had been subjected to mental conditioning designed to break their will and ensure absolute obedience. Human technology could undo that damage, restoring individual consciousness and free will. Casualties? Sarah asked. 0, Admiral. The quantum extraction process is completely non-invasive. We're removing entire populations without causing any harm to the individuals involved. Commander Rivera looked up from his tactical station. Admiral, we're detecting Imperial fleet movements throughout the sector. They're attempting to form a defensive line around their core systems. Sarah studied the strategic display. The Empire was pulling back their forces, abandoning the outer rim worlds to protect their most important systems. It was a predictable response, but it also created opportunities. Signal the liberation fleets, Sarah ordered. Begin simultaneous operations in all border systems. I want every Imperial slave facility targeted simultaneously. Force them to spread their defenses across hundreds of worlds. The human fleet had been divided into smaller task forces, each one capable of liberating entire star systems. Unlike the Empire's centralized command structure, human forces operated through distributed intelligence networks that allowed perfect coordination across vast distances. Within hours, reports began flooding into the Imperial Command Center. Humans were appearing throughout Imperial space, liberating slave populations and demonstrating technologies that made military resistance futile. Sir, Fleet Admiral Kexthar reported to Mordex, we're receiving surrender requests from over 50 regional commanders. They're reporting that resistance is impossible and requesting permission to negotiate with the humans. Denied, Mordex roared. The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. But even as he spoke, more reports arrived. The humans weren't just liberating slaves. They were offering assistance to Imperial forces willing to surrender. Ships that laid down their arms were not destroyed, but instead subjected to some form of technological conversion that left their crews conscious and unharmed, but completely unable to resume hostilities. Admiral Vexthara, his ship limping toward the nearest Imperial stronghold, transmitted a report that shattered whatever remained of Imperial confidence. Grand Admiral, Vexthara said, I've been monitoring human communications. They're not just liberating our slave populations, they're healing them. Beings who have been under Imperial conditioning for decades are being restored to their original psychological states within hours. Impossible, Mordex replied. Sir, I've seen the evidence. The humans have technology that can undo mental conditioning at the neural level. Every species we've conquered, every population we've enslaved, they can all be restored to their pre-conquest states of mind. The implications were devastating. The Empire's control over its conquered populations depended on psychological conditioning that took years to implement and was supposedly irreversible. If humans could undo that conditioning instantly, the entire basis of imperial control would collapse. Furthermore, Vexthara continued, they're not killing our forces. Imperial ships that surrender are being subjected to the same neural restoration technology. Our own crews are being freed from imperial conditioning. Mordex realized what this meant. The humans weren't just militarily superior. They possessed technology that could liberate minds as well as bodies. Every imperial citizen who encountered them would be freed from the psychological conditioning that had maintained imperial loyalty for centuries. How many systems have been affected? Mordex asked. Current reports indicate human operations in over 200 systems simultaneously. They're moving faster than our communication networks can track. By the time we receive word of their presence, entire populations have already been liberated. The strategic display showed the scope of the disaster. Green markers were appearing throughout Imperial space as human forces systematically liberated world after world. But these weren't military conquests. They were liberation operations that targeted the psychological foundations of Imperial control. Sir, Communications Admiral Jexvara interrupted, we're receiving a direct transmission from the human fleet. Admiral Chen is requesting to speak with you personally. Mordex wanted to refuse, but he needed to understand what humanity wanted. The face that appeared on his screen belonged to someone who had clearly lived through unimaginable hardship, yet emerged stronger rather than broken. Grand Admiral Mordex, Sarah said, I'm Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation. I believe it's time we had a conversation about the future of this galaxy. What do you want? Mordex demanded. What we've always wanted, Sarah replied. Freedom, not just for humanity, but for every species your empire has enslaved. We're offering you a choice, cooperation, or irrelevance. The empire will never surrender to inferior beings. Sarah's expression didn't change. Grand Admiral, you're still thinking in terms of conquest and surrender. We're not trying to replace your empire with our own. We're trying to create a galaxy where every species can choose its own destiny. She gestured, and the display showed footage from the liberated worlds. Instead of scenes of destruction and conquest, it showed beings of dozens of species working together, helping each other, building something new from the ruins of imperial oppression. Every being we've liberated has been given a choice, Sarah continued. They can return to their homeworlds, join our federation, or even choose to remain with the empire if that's truly what they want. But they're making that choice with free minds, not conditioned ones. You're destroying everything we've built. We're freeing everyone you've enslaved, Sarah corrected. The empire was built on the suppression of free will, the exploitation of other species, and the belief that might makes right. We're offering an alternative, a civilization based on cooperation, mutual respect, and the understanding that diversity makes us all stronger. Mordex stared at the displays showing the systematic liberation of his empire. For 3,000 years, imperial power had seemed absolute and eternal. Now he watched it dissolve like mist before the rising sun of human technology and philosophy. What happens to us? He asked finally. That's up to you, Sarah replied. We can restore your people's free will, help you transition to a post-imperial civilization, and work together to build something better. Or you can continue to resist and watch your empire fade into irrelevance while the rest of the galaxy moves toward freedom. As the transmission ended, Mordex realized that the empire faced something it had never encountered before. An enemy that sought not to conquer but to liberate, not to destroy but to transform. The humans had returned not as vengeful destroyers, but as liberators carrying technologies and philosophies that made the very concept of empire obsolete. The galaxy was changing, and the empire would either change with it or be left behind by the tide of liberation that humanity had unleashed across the stars. 1 year after the first human ships appeared at the edge of imperial space, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the orbital station that now served as the center of galactic governance. Through the transparent walls, she could see hundreds of ships from dozens of species, former imperial subjects now working together as equal partners in what they had named the Galactic Cooperation Council. The transformation had been faster and more complete than anyone had imagined possible. The empire that had ruled for 3 millennia had dissolved not through violence, but through the simple restoration of free will to its enslaved populations. When beings were given the choice between freedom and servitude, the decision had been nearly unanimous. "Admiral," came a voice behind her. Sarah turned to see former Grand Admiral Mordex approaching, his bearing much different from the arrogant ruler she had first encountered. The neural restoration technology had freed him from the psychological conditioning that had shaped imperial thinking for generations, and the change was remarkable. "Mordex," Sarah replied with a slight smile. She had insisted that all former imperial leaders abandon their military titles as part of the transition to civilian governance. "How are the integration programs proceeding?" "Better than anyone expected," Mordex admitted. "It's strange, for 3,000 years we believed that order required domination, that cooperation was impossible between different species. Now I see how wrong we were." The neural restoration process had been one of humanity's greatest gifts to the galaxy. Beings who had lived their entire lives under imperial conditioning discovered thoughts, feelings, and perspectives they had never known they possessed. The psychological architecture of empire, the belief in racial superiority, the acceptance of slavery, the glorification of conquest, had simply evaporated when minds were freed to think clearly. "The Catharian delegates have requested permission to establish a memorial on their homeworld," Mordex continued. "They want to honor the billions who died during the imperial occupation, but they also want to acknowledge the former imperial administrators who chose cooperation over resistance." Sarah nodded approvingly. This had been one of the most remarkable aspects of the transition. Instead of seeking revenge against their former oppressors, most liberated species had shown extraordinary compassion for imperial citizens who were, in many ways, victims of the same psychological conditioning that had enabled their oppression. "What about the former imperial worlds? Are they adapting to self-governance?" "The transition has been smoother than our most optimistic projections," Mordex replied. "It turns out that when you remove the psychological barriers to cooperation, most beings naturally gravitate toward collaborative solutions. The hard part wasn't teaching former imperial worlds to govern themselves. It was helping them unlearn the habits of authoritarian thinking." Dr. Elena Vasquez joined them at the observation window, her neural interface glowing softly as she processed data from across the galaxy. "Admiral, I've completed the final analysis of the transformation process. The results are extraordinary." "Show me," Sarah requested. Elena activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy before and after the human intervention. The before image showed the rigid hierarchy of imperial control, a central core surrounded by layers of enslaved worlds, with resources flowing toward the center and oppression radiating outward. The after image was completely different. Instead of a single center of power, the galaxy now contained thousands of interconnected nodes representing independent worlds and species cooperating through voluntary associations. Trade flowed in all directions based on mutual benefit rather than forced tribute. Knowledge and technology were shared freely rather than hoarded by the dominant species. "The economic transformation has been the most dramatic," Elena continued. "Imperial tribute systems were incredibly inefficient. They transferred wealth from productive worlds to maintain military forces whose sole purpose was to maintain oppression. Now that energy is being redirected toward innovation, exploration, and mutual aid." "What about technological development?" Sarah asked. "Exponential acceleration across all fields," Elena replied enthusiastically. "When you have hundreds of species sharing knowledge freely instead of being forced to suppress their innovations, progress becomes inevitable. We've seen breakthrough discoveries every week in physics, biology, consciousness research, and dimensional engineering." This had been one of the most unexpected consequences of liberation. Under imperial rule, conquered species had been forbidden from developing advanced technology that might threaten imperial supremacy. Now, freed from those restrictions and able to collaborate openly, the galaxy was experiencing a renaissance of scientific discovery. Commander Marcus Rivera approached the group, carrying reports from the Outer Rim territories, where human exploration fleets were making contact with species that had remained hidden from imperial expansion. "Admiral, the exploration missions have located 47 previously unknown civilizations beyond former imperial space. Most of them went into hiding during the Empire's expansion, developing advanced stealth technologies to avoid conquest." "Are they willing to make contact now?" Sarah asked. "More than willing. Rivera replied with a grin. They're eager to join the Cooperation Council now that they know the Empire is gone. Several of them have technologies that complement our own. One species has mastered biological computing, another has developed consciousness transfer techniques, and a third has created self-replicating automated manufacturing systems. Sarah felt a deep satisfaction at this news. Humanity's return to the galaxy wasn't just about liberation. It was about unlocking the full potential of galactic civilization that had been suppressed for 3 millennia under Imperial rule. There's something else, Rivera continued. The deep space monitoring stations have detected evidence of other galaxies with similar histories, vast empires that suppress the development of subject species. The rescued civilizations are requesting permission to join human expeditions to liberate those galaxies as well. This was perhaps the most profound consequence of the transformation. Liberation had become a philosophy, a way of thinking that spread naturally from one species to another. Beings who had experienced freedom were eager to share that gift with others still trapped under oppressive systems. Mordex studied the reports with interest. A year ago, the thought of venturing beyond our galaxy would have been inconceivable. The Empire's resources were entirely focused on maintaining control over existing territories. Now, with voluntary cooperation replacing forced compliance, we have energy and resources available for projects we never could have imagined. Sarah activated her communication device and opened a channel to the Galactic Cooperation Council's main chamber, where representatives from over 200 species were debating proposals for the galaxy's future development. "Council members," she said, "we have a proposal for consideration. Several liberated civilizations have requested permission to join exploration missions beyond our galaxy, with the goal of extending liberation to other oppressed species in distant star systems." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Voices from dozens of species expressed eager support for the mission. These Ephirians offered their dimensional navigation expertise. The Crystal World survivors volunteered their advanced manufacturing capabilities. The former Imperial Engineering Corps requested permission to design vessels capable of intergalactic travel. "It's remarkable," Mordex said quietly. "Under the Empire, such a mission would have been impossible because it would have required trust and cooperation between species. Now, that same cooperation makes interstellar liberation not just possible but inevitable." Sarah smiled as she watched the galaxy's representatives work together to plan humanity's next great adventure. 3 centuries of exile had transformed a single species from desperate refugees into liberators of the galaxy. Now, that same process was transforming the entire galaxy from a collection of oppressed subjects into a cooperative force capable of spreading freedom throughout the universe. "Dr. Vasquez," Sarah said, "begin preliminary designs for intergalactic liberation vessels. I want ships that can carry not just our technology but our philosophy. We're not just going to free enslaved populations, we're going to teach them how to free others." "Already working on it, Admiral," Elena replied. "I'm incorporating the consciousness restoration technology, the dimensional displacement systems, and the cooperative AI networks into vessels designed specifically for liberation missions. Each ship will be a complete freedom package, technology, philosophy, and support systems for transforming entire civilizations." As the day progressed, reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy. Former slave worlds were requesting membership in the Cooperation Council. Hidden civilizations were emerging from concealment to share their knowledge and resources. Even former Imperial military forces were volunteering for liberation missions, eager to atone for their past by helping free other oppressed species. "You know what's most remarkable about all of this?" Mordex said as they watched the sunset through the station's observation windows. "The Empire lasted for 3,000 years because we believed that power required domination. We never imagined that true strength could come from voluntary cooperation. Now I see that we were weak precisely because we relied on force rather than inspiration." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Humanity learned the same lesson during our exile. When you have no power except what others choose to give you, you learn that the strongest force in the universe isn't conquest. It's the desire for freedom that exists in every conscious being." She gestured toward the view of the galaxy beyond the station. "The Empire thought it had destroyed us, but it actually created us. Every year of exile, every challenge we faced, every impossible problem we had to solve, All of it prepared us to become liberators rather than conquerors. As the station rotated to reveal a new view of the galaxy, they could see the lights of thousands of worlds where beings lived in freedom for the first time in millennia. Trade ships moved peacefully between star systems. Research vessels explored the galaxy's mysteries with crews drawn from dozens of species. Children of various races played together in orbital habitats designed by collective intelligence rather than imperial architects. "What's next?" Mordex asked. Sarah smiled as she watched a group of human and alien children working together on a science project visible through another section of the station. "We keep growing. We keep learning. We keep freeing minds wherever we find them. And we teach the galaxy's children that cooperation is stronger than conquest, that diversity is more powerful than uniformity, and that the universe belongs to all conscious beings equally." The transformation of the galaxy was complete, but the transformation of the universe had only just begun. Humanity had returned from exile not as conquerors, but as teachers, carrying the gift of freedom to every corner of existence where oppression had taken root. The Empire was dead, but from its ashes had risen something far greater, a galactic civilization dedicated to liberation, exploration, and the endless expansion of consciousness and cooperation throughout the cosmos. The humans had indeed shocked the galaxy, but not through destruction. They had shocked it through the demonstration that love, freedom, and cooperation could triumph over even the most entrenched systems of oppression. The galaxy would never be the same,